Konnichiwa, welcome to the Martial Maze. This is Lopez sensei, and again, without my partner, Crown Doshi, but we got one for you. But before we begin dealing with the topic of discussion today, I just want to say two things. We just recently had our elections, and for some folks, it worked out really well for them, and other folks not so well. And we're all kind of stuck in this pot together, so I guess we got to kind of see where things are going to go over the next 4 years. With that being said, you folks in the martial community who hold commercial dojos and you're posting this misogynistic bullshit, about women, being second class and no real man would be allowed to let a woman rule them. And, uh, yeah, that y'all stop. Stop with that silliness. Okay. It is sick and sad that you have that personal belief about women, but for some of you out there, it kind of makes sense. The fact that you are now saying the quiet part out loud, that's a sign of a scarier time. That you're kind of letting folks see your true colors, and that's gonna bite you in the ass. I, for one, I'm gonna tell you that's gonna bite you in the ass. You know, well, but we see you. We, the martial community, see you, sir. All right, so there's that. Moving forward, today's episode is really about being blackballed in the martial arts. And this kind of came up recently with a conversation I was having with my partner, Doshi, when we were talking about, we were just having our annual meeting, well, actually more like our weekly meeting on what we were going to do next and where things are going for the martial maze. And we were discussing, because again, we have a lot of folks that reach out to us, and we reach out to a lot of folks that we want to have on the show and stuff like that, and we're always dealing with this political tight wire, right? And anyone who does what we do, in whether you be DOS, whether you're Black Belt Magazine, whether you're McDojo Life, we're all kind of still riding this kind of tightrope, and stuff like that, where when we're talking about things and just dealing with other individuals that we have screening processes and we got to kind of filter out some of the folks that are in the classification of bullshido, or some of the classification of just willfully, well, not willfully, but just ignorance. They just didn't know any better and stuff like that. And then we got legitimate folk. I mean, there are tons of legitimate folk, but it does seem like martial arts is a big tent, but not really. Like in the grandest scheme of things, with all the other things out there, in way of sports or just in general, that martial arts is a really small community. It's even smaller once you start specializing. So if you're in judo, it's worldwide, but it's still a very tight community. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, same thing with them, folks. It's still kind of a tight community. Kempo, very tight community. The only one that seems to kind of be all encompassing, like I said, that kind of that better representation of the big tent is something like MMA, and it's because there's just more than one discipline being dealt with in those locations and stuff like that. So there's that. So when we're looking at someone and an individual, we have to start asking ourselves, is this person being blackballed? And for those that don't know, that's basically when a bunch of folk, or normally folks in power, or folks that have a degree of influence and power, don't like you. And it could be because you're full of shit, or it could just be because they just didn't like you. And where we have a problem is when the "we don't like you" becomes the governing thing for why you're not being accepted, or for why doors that would normally be open for so many others are being closed in front of you. And that's not a good thing. I personally believe that's not a good thing, and that as martial artists, that we should stop that kind of stuff, and we should all know better. Hold all of us to account, but it does happen. And so you're always walking in, and this is kind of where it ties into the first part, when I was going to call this kind of a political episode, but I kind of feel like right now in America, that could kind of be too soon, too soon, really to talk about politics. But I have my own thought process about when we talk what we call air quotations politics. I really think it's about personal ideology, and that's why we're so divided as a country. I don't think it's politics as usual, which is just governance. I think a lot of these things that we're dealing with right now in this country and in the martial arts, believe it or not, have more to do with someone's personal ideology or a group's way a certain group of martial artists think versus something that should be to work for everybody, right? Because if we're talking about regular politics, then like something like the economy is something that would be kind of like really just politics 101, right? Because now we're talking about how our money is spent and things like that, or where how far my money goes, right? It's kind of the same way in the martial arts, where if we're talking about a system or style, and the way we all learn that system and move throughout that system, that's one thing. But when you start to let that I don't like Tommy and let that be the reason why Tommy never gets invited to the tournaments. Tommy never gets a phone call. Tommy never, you know what I mean. And when Tommy shows up, his students are shunned. They get bad calls against him just because. Then that's a problem. That's a person because that's a personal thing. That has nothing to do with Tommy and his ability, or you know what I'm saying, to get it done. It has nothing to do with your system, right? So when Barack and I were having this discussion, we were kind of going over somebody we wanted to have on the show and whether or not that individual is being blackballed or it does it have to do with their their martial skill, right? So as we started doing a lot more research into this martial artist's skill set, well, there really weren't red flags. There weren't as many red flags as I thought I was going to see, right? That would explain away why we were asked by some others and why this even had to be a conversation between Barack and myself. And we came away with, well, maybe this individual may just be being blackballed. So we're gonna have to wait and see because I'm still, researching this and waiting for other folk to get back about this individual's lineage, and which again inspired along with the elections and kind of inspired this particular episode and whether or not it's okay to blackball. I think the listener right now, I think you're pretty much have it clear that I'm not okay with that. I think I think that as martial artists, we're being shitty human beings if we're doing that. We just really are, and that's just never okay. And also, I'm going to tell you, I'm still in my feelings about because some of these folks I've been dealing with for years, I've known for years, and some of the things that they've felt now that they can just put out online is just insane. I mean, I had to make a phone call to an individual I've been dealing with since I was a young man. Like when I say a young man, to kind of put that in perspective, before I was legally able to consume alcohol. Okay, so I mean, there's that. So I mean, I've known this person this amount of time, and and again, I was just kind of like, hey man, is your page private? Like, I mean, but even to being private, I mean, how's that affecting you with your family? I mean, and and we both kind of got in our feelings, and the discussion got a little hot. I mean, and we both came away with it's not an agree to disagree kind of thing, man. I'm not sure if we're still friends now. That's kind of how that whole thing went, and stuff like that, based on just that. Because again, um, it's not politics as usual. That's his personal belief system, and my personal belief system clashed. And I mean, and it might be some of that stuff is kind of geared around maybe the way we were raised. I had nothing but strong women in my life. You know what I'm saying? So there's that. So let's move on. But I'm just kind of so you, the listener, can kind of get a perspective of where I am, Israel Lopez today. You know, uh, and why I kind of felt the way I did, and kind of I'm not gonna say this is more of being an angry rant, but it's just kind of again when we think about a martial artist. Um, or a martial system, we break it down by whether or not it's effective, right? Right? I mean, like, why study something if it's not going to be effective? However, It's because martial arts is such a big tent. Even though I may talk about, like I think I've said in the past, that I can't fathom training under anyone who's never been in a real fight. I just, and that's because of my personal belief. That's a personal thing. Again, understanding that not everybody does that. If you're living your life in such a way where violence misses you, that's you're never fighting. You're never gonna get into that kind of physical altercation. But you might like the way, like many of us when we begin our martial journeys by watching kung fu movies, right? Whether it be the Peking opera or just like the double feature kung fu and stuff like that, or hell, if you're younger, it might have been something like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, obviously you're not or Naruto, right? Um, and you're obviously understand that some of that stuff you disappear, reappeared. I mean, like, bro, thankfully Brock isn't here because anytime I mention the ninja, he cringes a little bit, um, and stuff like that. One mostly because it's a Chinese word, but moving past that, I mean, we all like if you grew up the way I did. I mean, you got the ninja. Come on, man, you drop the smoke bombs and you're doing all this crazy stuff, and that of course influenced you, and but that's movies. Some of those guys couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. They just couldn't. But they do movies, right? I mean, there are folks that get awards for kata left and right, and I've heard other martial artists say things like, "Yeah, but that guy really can't fight. I mean, he doesn't really even understand the information. He's just doing a dance." But like others have said that I've dealt with in the fact. I mean, others that have said this in the past that we've dealt with, you know, people that do stunts and do a fight choreography, it looks good for the movies. It looks good for them, and it doesn't take them out of being martial artists. Even though I might personally believe that, well, if the guy can't fight, then what good is it, right? Well, when he's cashing that check, you know what I mean, and he has that bread, that he can hire that personal security or something like that. I guess he's doing all right. He ain't dealing with all of that. So even though I have a personal opinion about something, doesn't necessarily mean that I think that all of that, that's fake. Well, we're not going to count those folks because they don't, nope, that's garbage martial art and all that other good stuff. I mean, and I think to be honest, doing the martial maze these many years, my perspective on those things have changed. Sometimes if you're a fan of the show, if you think about the things I've said year one, how what I've said has kind of evolved. It's not the same way because, well, I got out of my comfort zone. When we do the show, we travel all over. And I mean, literally, we travel all over the United States. And we're dealing with not just judo, even though, because I'm a judo guy, I like talking about judo. That's where my home is. But, we still dealing with the Okinawan martial systems. We're still dealing with the hybrid systems. You know what I'm saying? But we also had to take into account there are people who just they do it for show. This is the violent side, they weren't living that way. They grew up in a really nice neighborhoods, nice areas, and for whatever reason they just never had to deal with that kind of violence. But they liked it. They liked what they saw. You know what I'm saying? There are things even for me that I still very much am very fascinated with. We have an episode coming up with Five Element Tai Chi, which is like that was due like so long ago, right? Finally it's going to end up releasing, and that I hope it gets received rather well in the martial community. I think the reason why it's been such a long project for me is because the individual the episode's really about, it's still very near and dear to my heart. So it made it kind of hard to do a thing because it's almost like something I wanted to keep just for me. So I'm hoping that it does it justice, but something like Five Element Tai Chi, completely fascinated with. And and at some point I'm going to learn it. I go back and forth to Massachusetts and get together with folks to learn some of that Five Element Tai Chi. And personally, I will tell you, trying not to drop too many spoilers about it, I think the main reason why I'm more into that is because it's an individual I've known a great deal of my life. It's his life's work. It's everything led to this. So it's all of that. So you get to, as you're learning, and anybody who actually has been fortunate enough to learn Five Element Tai Chi out in Massachusetts, hey, you're getting something special because each movement, keep in mind, evolved. It's a man's life work. So this is the culmination of this man's work in my time, like, right? And for me, that's so awesome because how many out there can say that? Like, that you were there in the beginning when it was being formed. You might have been the dummy that was used occasionally to see if a technique worked or not, and then to watch it grow and change and blossom and turn into this magnificent thing way later. And that's going to stand the test of time because when for those that know who I'm talking about, Master Wu, when Master Wu passes, God, when that time comes, uh, it'll five element will still be there. It's still going to continue on, so it's like he gets to live forever. I don't know. I just think that's awesome. And that's coming up, right? Um, so I don't get too far off subject. So circling back to this individual who, at this point, like I said, we believe is being blackballed by the martial community, unfairly, unjustly. You know, however, with that being said, there's always three sides of an argument. His version, the other side's version, and then kind of what's really going on. And but we listen. We talk to a lot of different folks. I am very happy and very impressed with the network of other martial artists and other folks that do kind of what you're watching right now, whether they do podcasts, whether they're doing the YouTube channels, whether they're doing just full-on channels. There's a channel in Massachusetts that literally it's a martial arts channel, like it's a full-on channel. And they have a YouTube platform as well. That literally it is a martial arts channel. You can watch old films, old things, and stuff like that. And we think that's pretty awesome. And I know we got something in the works to do with those good folks. Also, the Urban Action Showcase is happening this weekend. It's in Manhattan, in New York City. And if you haven't got your tickets, you need to be there. You need to go, because it's Demetrius Angelo's Urban Action Showcase. And going back to just what I'm kind of talking about, there are a lot of folks that are just in the action genre. They're doing a thing, and they're some of these folks are full on hardcore martial artists, while other folks kind of came in it just to learn the kicks and the punches and what to do. And they kind of fell in love with it during the fight choreography and stuff like that, and eventually became martial artists. But it's just, you're getting a whole plethora of folk. You know what I'm saying? That are just in different levels of the game. You know what I mean? And they're just all over. So it's different parts of that mountain, right? And stuff like that. So that's kind of why the maze is behind us right now, because they did all over it. So if you don't have your tickets, unfortunately I'm gonna miss it this year, which really sucks. But I'm also filming in location in Atlanta. So Modern Combatives is coming up, and we've already started filming. So be sure to watch some teasers for that. We'll be putting it on our platform, and you good folks will get to see you'll get to see some of this weekend, because I'm going to drop some stuff just to drop it before the season actually begins, where we actually start dropping full on episodes and stuff like that. So. But because I know somebody somewhere is going, you were just talking about Five Element. When is that happening? You've been teasing that for some while too. That's good. That's going to drop. So you'll get to see some of the Five Element Taiichi, and hopefully, like I said, I'm really concerned that I might have built it up to like here, and folks are going to be like, "Yo, we're expecting amazing things." I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed filming it and putting that together and stuff like that, and the good folks that all came together to kind of make that one work, and it was cool because some of us put personal issues aside to make sure that kind of came together, so we can give Master Wu his flowers and stuff like that before while he's still alive, because that's, I think sometimes that's the quote Demetrius Angelo. He when he did his acceptance speech at the Maze Awards, I like that he said that giving folks flowers while they're still here, while they're still with us, because in the martial community sometimes we have a habit of those flowers not being delivered, or not the folk that were very deserving not getting those flowers while they were still alive. How many times have we been somewhere and, oh my God, and he was so great, but and no one told him that he was great, and stuff like that. So definitely make sure you get out to the Urban Action Showcase, and stuff like that. At the Martial Maze, we're happy because it was got a phone call last night because Master Kudo Sensei, Noriyashi Kudo, for judo is going to be receiving his ninth, which that's a long time coming and stuff like that. And for those that don't understand, we did last week's episode was kind of on. I ended up doing that as a collaboration with Blackhawk, and that was whether or not your the rank is the same as the title grandmaster and stuff like that. So to put that in perspective, Master Kudo Sensei, he's relatively old. And when I say old, and he's just receiving his ninth in judo, and and we're very happy. He ran our club for a little over a year. And that I think if we ran the numbers right, it was closer to 2 years, but we always just say a full on year. Before he went off to do bigger and better things. And but I've known Master Kudo since I was a young man because Kudo Sensei and my instructor Mareki Sensei were really good friends and stuff like that. So they've known each other like with Master Wu. Like I will tell you that in my particular case, I was very fortunate. Like with some of the folks in New York, where you had a lot of really good talent at your fingertips. And in my case, it was the same thing in Massachusetts, where coming up, we had a lot of really good talent in our area. And, so I got to work with some of the, or train with, or actually not train with, train under. That's because in my case, being like a young whippersnapper at that point in time in life, I got to be around some really great martial artists that were just still in their heyday, still doing their thing, and just being phenomenal at what they do, and which was awesome, and stuff like that. So I got to see a lot of these guys, got a lot of video and stuff like that. I had hair, which was kind of crazy too. In fact, there are a lot of photos because I was never that person that stood in photos, kind of taking pictures with people. I was always the dude on the mat, and a lot of times it's kind of came up fairly recently that there's a photo at an acquaintance's gym, and I had to point that's me in the background, and he's like, no, and he looked, oh wow, that's you, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, because I was around like Pepperidge Farms, like but all right. When I reflect, I feel like where we came from, boys will be boys. I always tell folks there are a lot of laws that did not exist back in the 80s and the 70s and 80s that exist now because of all the shit that was happening. And anyone who would try to manipulate, take advantage of, and don't get me wrong, there's times where I'm guilty of it too. In fact, we were out with some friends last night, a particular friend last night, where I started to mansplain something and I had to catch myself. And and that's something that's new. That's new to me. You know what I'm saying? And again, as martial artists, we're always trying to learn. We're always trying to evolve. We're trying to be better right? That's the thing, to be better than where we were yesterday, right? So it's always a work in progress. But I understand the old way of thinking doesn't make that shit okay. And to put this in the perspective for some of my brothers out there, right, who may not have been alive during the civil rights movement, I just want y'all to kind of meditate on this shit for real. The way some, not all, but some white folks back then treated us, right? They had to evolve their way of thinking, based upon a normal that they had grown up in. Meaning that those folks that grew up, including black folks that grew up on the blacks only, whites only. Imagine growing up in that time as a young kid, young white kid, young black kid, and having to learn as time changed, as the civil rights movement caught fire, and as those walls and those barriers were broken down, having to learn, right, to be better. Okay, that was the way I grew up, but that is not okay. Now we need to be better, right? And that is what I want you folk, especially folks that look like me, that are out here running and saying stupid shit like that, about women and stuff like that. That boom, let that resonate a little bit. And And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time. You've been listening to The Martial Maze, and I'm Israel Lopez Sensei. You have a good day.